I thank the Speaker. As I was preparing to give remarks, I was listening to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. One of the points being raised was about champions of Title IX. And what would they say? I think that's a fantastic question. Just today in the House Judiciary Committee, we had a witness, a young lady who was a swimmer for the University of Pennsylvania. And I asked her whether Lia Thomas is a man or a woman. And this female swimmer replied without hesitation that indeed that swimmer is a biological male. Now, that gets sometimes dismissed as, I don't know, humorous or absurd or whatever in these culture battles. But the fact is, the young lady testifying was a victim of sexual assault and didn't want to have to be in a bathroom changing with a biological male. And yet my colleagues on the other side of the aisle dismiss it. They dismiss Riley Gaines' concern about competing against a biological male while they champion Title IX. You literally can't even make it up. Come to the floor, champion Title IX, and yet they destroy Title IX by virtue of saying, oh yeah, it's fine. Doesn't matter if you're a dude. Suit up, jump in the pool, and swim. I asked one of the witnesses today, I said, well, is the International Federation of Swimming, or whatever it's called, is that some grand right-wing conspiracy? And she kind of chuckled and said no. She knew where I was going, which is that organization had banned Lia Thomas and other biological males competing against women in the 2024 Olympics. Because of course they did. At least if they're being at all rational. Doesn't mean that won't change. It doesn't mean that the irrational won't take over. It doesn't mean that the absurd won't define how we live our lives. But at least in this case, the committee said, yeah, maybe a dude shouldn't swim against girls in the swim meets. But my colleagues on the other side of the aisle dismissed that as right-wing lunacy, MAGA extremism. I never know what I am. I support Ron DeSantis, and I'm a MAGA hater. On the floor of the House, I'm a MAGA extremist because I dare to stand up for the American people who are sick of having their world turned upside down. Have my colleagues on the other side of the aisle saying, well, we have important work to do, but all they care about are book bans. Well, that's just a lie. It's just a straight up lie. The accusations of book banning. Do you know what kind of books have been put on the chopping block in Florida? Books that have straight up pornography in them that parents dared to say, wait a minute, I don't think I want that in the public schools library. Now wait, is that what a book ban is? Because if it is, sign me up. Sign me up. Because I don't want that in my kids' library, and that is actually the fundamental question. Are we going to stand up and say, we're going to stand up for our kids? Are we in this body are people who just want normalcy and their lives back in legislatures across this country and in governors' mansions across this country, going to stand up and say, yes, there is man and there is woman. And no, the men shouldn't compete against women in their swim meets or their track meets. And no, we shouldn't put pornography of any kind, straight, gay, otherwise, in the public libraries of our kids' schools, and then be labeled as book banners. Because if that's what you're going to do, I'm going to stand up and say yes. But meanwhile, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to shut down free speech. They want to say anything I'm saying. In fact, what I'm saying right now, they would say is disinformation. What I'm saying right now, they would say if I put it on social media, they'd be all too happy to have big tech companies or the power of government shut down my speech. Now, I'm protected on the floor of the House, but every American is supposed to be protected with free speech. And I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to keep saying that Lia Thomas is a dude, and I'll say it here, and I'll say it on social media, and I'll say it on the streets, and if they dare try to stop me, that's what the First Amendment is all about. And we're going to stand up and defend that. And we're going to stand up and defend normalcy. We had accusations that, oh, this is all made up. We actually had somebody in one of the hearings today in which we were talking about transgender issues and so-called, dysphoria. We had a young lady who I could barely speak after I heard her testimony. I could barely figure out what to say to her because she had started to be transitioned, changed sex, realized that she was going to lose the ability as a woman to breastfeed her hopefully one day children, and she stopped. And she was testifying today about the horrors of the pressure being placed upon her to change her sex. And she broke down in tears. And then she was talking about one of the other witnesses at the table, a mom that was talking about her child, the Democratic witness, and saying how important it was to be able to have the transition. And here's what our witness, Chloe Cole, said. Quote, "I understand that Mrs. Reynolds is scared for her child. And I just want to set the record straight that I don't hate her. I don't think anyone in this room hates her. In fact," she said, as she began to cry, and as all of us, by the way, on the dais were holding back tears, "I see my own mother and my own father in her. And that clearly she dearly loves her child. And she's doing the best with that she's been given. And unfortunately, it's not much. And for that, I'm sorry." She remained emotional. She continued, she said, "I think every parent deserves the utmost grace and guidance with how to help their child. I don't wish for her child to have the same result as I did," she said. "I don't wish for anyone to regret transition or detransition because it's incredibly difficult. It comes with its own difficulties, and it's not easy. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle call that hate speech. They say that if we bring these questions up about transitioning people's sex, their God-given chromosomes and sex, because we've got pressure on social media and the devil that is or are these devices that our kids spend hundreds of hours on, and you wonder, if I dare say that, oh no, that's hate speech. And if you think I'm crazy, look around the world. Look around the world. We had a public official in Finland who was being prosecuted last year, and is still having to go through it, for daring to have distributed materials saying that she believed in traditional marriage instead of same-sex marriage. She was being prosecuted despite being a member of the parliament. I'm just telling you, America, it is coming to a theater near you. Don't think for a minute that the people who are decrying what I'm saying as hate speech don't want me to be in jail for it. They do. In a heartbeat, I would be put in jail for daring to stand up in defense of my faith, my values, my beliefs, and in this case, for simply saying there is man and there is woman. That's where we stand as a society. I went on to, I heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and this is not what I came to the floor to talk about, by the way. But I heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle talking about schools and how we want to, scare parents by talking about these issues. This is all to scare parents, they said in the hearing. Well, how about this? Today, news report, Vermont School District removes male and female from the reproductive system lessons. Let that sink in for a minute. Just want you to think about it. What's the first thing you do if you're a farmer and you get a new calf, or you're trying to figure, what do you look? Is it a boy or a girl? What's the first thing you do when your baby's born? Well, is it a boy or a girl? They're literally taking out of the lessons in the Vermont school district on reproductive system. They're taking out male and female. That is so bat crap crazy, I can't even possibly put it into words. Yet, I'm the one, according to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, who's hateful, because we're trying to pass in a National Defense Authorization Act language to say that perhaps, color me crazy, our Defense Department should be focused on a mission to kill people and blow stuff up when called upon to do so, hopefully on a limited basis, but really daggum effectively when called upon to do so. I think if I polled most Americans, they would say, I want my defense to be better than every other country's by an order of magnitude, highly trained, and I don't think any of them would rank diversity, equity, inclusion, or transgender surgeries high on the National Defense Authorization list of priorities, or climate change. I don't think most of my constituents care that they drive around battery-powered Jeeps or battery-powered Hummers or battery-powered tanks. They actually want them to work. They actually want them to blow things up. So we dare to say, how about the National Defense Authorization Act focus on defense? And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle come down crying hate, crying that we're injecting culture wars into the Defense Department. Well, wait, who exactly is it that injected culture wars into the Defense Department? This administration, my Democratic colleagues. And we're trying to get defense back on track. And we did so, by the way. But our Democratic colleagues in the Senate are going to refuse to take up the version of the National Defense Authorization Act that we passed. They're going to want to cleanse it. Let's not forget, to all my colleagues on this side of the aisle, that when they cleanse it, what they're really doing is polluting the Department of Defense, which is driving down recruiting and driving down our effectiveness. We're losing simulations by the day. Our numbers are going down by the day. Our effectiveness is going down by the day. Our stockpiles are going down by the day, because they've turned the Department of Defense into a social engineering experiment wrapped in a uniform. And that is criminal. And we shouldn't stand for it. But that's not the only thing we shouldn't stand for. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of having Alejandro Mayorkas, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, before us in the Judiciary Committee. I reminded the Secretary that about 15 months ago, he appeared before the Judiciary Committee. And when he did so, I asked him point blank, Mr. Secretary, do you have, in your job as the Secretary, operational control of the border? He said, I do. I said, wait, you have operational control of the border? And I pulled up the statute, the Secure Fence Act, which requires this country and the Secretary carrying out his job to maintain operational control. I pulled up a second board with a statute definition about what is operational control. And it means you do not allow anybody to come across the border and into our country without papers and knowing who they are. You don't allow illegal trafficking. You don't allow narcotics to come across. You have operational control of the border. I put all that up. I said, are you sure you have operational control of the border? The Secretary said, I do. Pushed on him multiple times. Funny enough, a little bit later, in a different hearing, later this year, over in the Senate, the Secretary changed his tune. He said, well, by that definition under the Secure Fence Act, I don't use that one. He said, under that definition, nobody's ever had operational control. The fact is, the Secretary wants the American people to believe that our country is in charge of our border when anybody with eyes knows that it is the cartels who have operational control of our border. that they are wide open and lawless, and Americans are dying as a result from fentanyl poisonings, and migrants are dying as a result in the false name of compassion, while my Democratic colleagues pat themselves on the back while 53 people roast in a tractor trailer in San Antonio, which I represent. Or the little girls that are sold into the sex trafficking trade, being exposed in the Sound of Freedom, making tens of billions of dollars, moving human beings for profit. That's what is happening, and my Democratic colleagues don't care, and the Secretary of Homeland Security doesn't care, and the Secretary of Homeland Security lied in front of me, in front of the entire Judiciary Committee, in front of all America, by saying that he has operational control of the border when faced with the statute, knowing what it means and knowing full well that he does not, we do not, our country does not. Governor Abbott was being criticized on the floor today by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle because he's putting up barriers. He's putting Texas DPS, Department of Public Safety, troopers down on the Rio Grande. He's deploying barriers in the middle of the Rio Grande. He's being criticized for being heartless. Who is it that's heartless? Those that want the rule of law enforced and to tell the world that you don't flood our borders in a way that's going to empower cartels and endanger yourself? Or is it heartless to allow all of those people to get sold into the sex trafficking trade, die in the Texas heat, get abused, get used by cartels? Like the federal judge in Texas who upward departed a few weeks ago from the penalties under our statutes and the sentencing guidelines because he ran across a case where the cartels had a stash house in Fort Worth, Texas. A man illegally here, a father, was in Baltimore, Maryland, and he was being told by the cartels his daughter would be raped if he didn't pay $23,000. That is happening every day in our country, every single day, in the supposed greatest country on the face of the earth and in history. We stand here, 435 of us, in front of that flag, and that flag is supposed to mean something. And it sure as hell doesn't mean anything if little girls are getting raped right here in D.C., up the road in Baltimore, in Houston, in San Antonio, in Laredo, in Fort Worth. We have evidence it's happening every day. And we don't do anything about it, except pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, well, we can just interpret parole and interpret asylum laws and just tell the world, come on up through Mexico. But don't mind the fact that thousands of you are going to die. You're going to get used by the cartels. You're going to pay millions of dollars. And your little girls are going to get exploited. Sound of freedom indeed. We should be ashamed of ourselves. And by the way, that goes for Republicans and Democrats, because it has happened under both of our watches for far too long. Why am I standing in front of this chart? Because about, 4 months ago, we passed in this body H.R. 2. We passed legislation that we know, we don't believe, we know would take significant strides to securing the border of the United States, reestablishing operational control, limiting the flow, limiting the power of cartels, empowering ICE, empowering Border Patrol, reestablishing the rule of law so that we can be the beacon of hope that people want to aspire to come here and live under. But of course, that bill is sitting over in a Senate that doesn't give a whit. So what do we do about it? That's my question for Republicans. I can sit here and bash my Democratic colleagues all day long for not caring about what's happening to Texas, for not caring about the 5 kids in the school district where I live who died from fentanyl poisoning, not caring about the 200 a day dying from fentanyl poisoning while fentanyl pours across our border, not caring about what's happening to Border Patrol agents, not caring that the Secretary of Homeland Security lied about Border Patrol agents allegedly whipping Haitian migrants, which we knew didn't happen, and the Secretary knew didn't happen. 2 hours before he went to the microphone and said they did it, and they did it for systemic racism. All of that is true. And my Democratic colleagues will not want to pass H.R. 2. So what will Republicans do about it? That is the question. And the answer is that we should recognize the power of the purse. James Madison, Federalist Paper number 58. The House of Representatives can not only refuse, but they alone can propose the supplies requisite for the support of the government. They, in a word, hold the purse. This power over the purse may in fact be regarded as, and this is the most important part, the most complete and effectual weapon with which any constitution can arm the immediate representatives of the people for obtaining a redress of every grievance and for carrying into effect every just and salutary measure. What that means is we get to decide how the tax dollars and the borrowed dollars are spent to carry out the laws of the United States, and no one else. We control the power of the purse. We are the people's house. It is our job to decide how those dollars are spent and then hold the executive branch accountable for carrying out the laws using those taxpayer dollars. That is not only our opportunity, it's our duty in the House of Representatives. So that is the question for Republicans. Will we take inventory and decide whether we care more about steak dinners at night and making a golf event or coming down to, do 3 votes in a week and then get home for the weekend? I mean, I noticed today's Thursday. We have one appropriations bill passed. We're not coming in tomorrow. We're blowing out for a 6-week recess. The government's going to run out of money on September 30th. That's one thing we know. Most people I represent would tell you they don't think we ought to spend more money. We ought to spend less. So the question is, are we going to find a way between now and September 30th, approximately 60 days from now, are we going to find the ability to pass appropriations bills that reduce spending, take our country back, but most importantly, check the executive branch from the tyranny that they are engaging in over the American people? The Department of Homeland Security is decidedly not securing the homeland. It's just true by any objective measure. Last September, I asked my House and Senate Republican colleagues if they would vote for a CR and continue to fund the tyranny being waged by this administration. I sent a letter with 6 pages of examples of how a CR would continue funding the very things the GOP members of this body campaign against. Now, that was September 27th of last year, about 40 days before the November election. What are the things GOP members campaign against? Open borders and funding for open borders. Authoritarian bureaucrats, the FBI, the IRS, the ATF, and the funding for those bureaucrats. Tyrannical public health agencies that shut down our economy, mandated vaccines, mandated masks. Funding for those agencies. Destructive energy policies through the Inflation Reduction Act, EPA, and Department of Energy, undermining the ability of this country to produce reliable energy that makes the world work. When, by the way, 3 billion people on this planet do not have reliable energy. 1 billion people don't have electricity at all. Funding for radical anti-American, anti-biology ideologies at the Department of Education, NPR, and HHS. Funding for the degradation of our national security with a woke Department of Defense. But nevertheless, 22 Senate Republicans still supported the CR, as did 10 House Republicans. Funding runs out on September 30th. And here we sit once again with two notable differences. We are now operating under bloated spending levels established by the FY23 omnibus bill passed last December. Now, if you don't know what that means, it's just the way this place works. Spending runs out in September. If we haven't passed appropriations bills through both bodies signed by the president, people freak out. They want the lights to stay on. October 1st rolls around. They pass a continuing resolution to keep the government going. Might pass it for a day or a week or a month. Often, they pass it for about 75 days. Now, why would you do that on September 30th for about 75 days? Do the math. That ends up in the middle of December. Now, why would the uniparty establishment Washington elite, who don't give a crap about debt, who don't care about what's happening to their country at the end of the day, but really care more about getting home for Christmas? That's why. So, what happened last December? That happened. A couple of days before Christmas, a $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill was passed, funding Ukraine to the tune of about $45 billion, increasing defense spending by about 10%, increasing non-defense by about 7%. All of that got done while what? We're at $32 trillion of debt and counting. Long before, by the way, a big deal was cut, raising your debt another $4 trillion on Memorial Day. Now, again, that happened while Republicans were in charge of the House. And 17 Republican senators voted for that. Why? I'll tell you why. The defense establishment in this town, combined with those who wanted to try to do something for Ukraine, said, oh, well, we know we have a lot of debt, but we got to cut a deal. I want to go home for Christmas. I want to wear a blue and yellow pin on my lapel. I want to feel good about myself, but that's okay. I'll pass the buck down to my kids and grandkids with a big pile of debt. So again, I'm going to ask my Republican colleagues, will we vote to continue to fund this tyrannical government while our border is wide open, little girls are getting abused, some 80 to 90,000 Americans a year dying from fentanyl poisoning, cartels empowered, China empowered? Are we going to continue to do that? We have the power of the purse. Will we use it? Or will we curl up in a little ball like we tend to do every single year and say, oh no, they're going to criticize us for a government shutdown? Every year, like clockwork. Now, I'm all for moving the appropriations bills and getting them done by September 30th. But I can promise you, as sure as the sun is coming up tomorrow, Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats are not going to bless the appropriations bills that we move through the House. They're not gonna. They're gonna then want to claim it is Republicans who are shutting down the government. But the question is, when we wake up on October 1st, are we Republicans going to have agreed to spend even one more dollar, to advance a tyrannical government that is stepping over the rights of the American people at the Department of Justice, the FBI, that are funding a woke government at the Department of Defense that leaves $85 billion behind in Afghanistan with no real accountability? And importantly, for the purpose of what I want to talk about more right now, is the border. We've seen 5.6 million illegal crossings since January of 2021. Under Secretary Mayorkas and President Biden, the number of known or suspected terrorists caught by border agents has increased each year. Fiscal year 21, 15, their first year. FY 22, 98. FY 23, 140 so far. Now, you think, oh gosh, they're doing their job. They caught all these guys. Well, what about the 8 or so million gotaways? Anybody concerned about the gotaways when you know you've got 140 so far individuals nabbed to be known or suspected terrorists? We've lost 85,000 kids. They've gone missing. Can't track them. Fentanyl, as I said before, Border Patrol has seized 22,000 pounds of fentanyl. I mean, I don't know if you understand, but a sugar packet of fentanyl could kill most of the people in this room, depending on its strength. They've seized 22,000 pounds of fentanyl, which would kill hundreds of millions of people. China sells the printing presses to cartels to make the pills that are killing our kids. Kids that take Xanax or Adderall, boom, one pill, dead. It happens all across America. 72,815 fentanyl poisonings, 200 a day. As of this month, 46 Texas counties, I represent Texas, 46 Texas counties have declared an invasion because of the number and volume of migrants entering their communities. They've got to deal with schools. They've got to deal with hospitals. They've got to deal with crime. They've got to have police do the jobs that need to be done. They've got to deal with bailouts. They've got to deal with fences getting cut. They've got to deal with livestock getting out. They got to deal with fentanyl pouring into their communities. They got to deal with marijuana traffic. They got to deal with all sorts of dangers. Texas has appropriated $10 billion to deal with the border. Texas should get that paid back. I'll be very clear. This member of Congress will not vote for a single CR or DHS appropriations bill that does not address the border security issue, turning H.R. 2 into law, removing the actors at DHS that refuse to do their job, and pays Texas back for the damage being done to the state I represent. And I'm not going to be alone. And if those senators think they're going to roll us, they got a fight on their hand, including Republican senators. I don't care what party you're in. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. The time for our border being chaos and dangerous and endangering migrants and endangering Americans, the time for that to end is now. Not after another presidential election. My colleagues on the other side of the house say, oh, we like to use all this for politics, to raise money, to campaign on it. My constituents are sick of hearing about it. I don't get a whole lot of praise from my constituents for talking about it. They want us to end it. They're exhausted. Ranchers breaking down in tears, 75-year-old crusty Texans who find a dead body on their ranch or are worried about their children, their livestock getting out. The ranch has been in their family for years. The moms who come to me having lost their children, like Stephanie Turner who lost her son Tucker, that I've gotten to know, dozens others. And the Secretary of Homeland Security has the audacity to come before the House Judiciary Committee and say he's got it all under control and lie. And yet, a number of my Republican colleagues run around going, well, that's not a high crime and misdemeanor. Constitutional scholars indeed. It is, in fact, an impeachable offense to lie under oath. And the Secretary of Homeland Security has lied under oath. putting aside all the other stuff, putting aside ignoring the laws, putting aside endangering Americans. All purposeful. Put all of that aside. If you think, oh, that's maladministration. Maladministration was rejected by the founders, don't you see, Chip? I get these lessons all the time, Con Law 101 from my colleagues. First of all, not 100% true. Maladministration is viewed by some of the people who study this to have been subsumed into what was known to be high crimes and misdemeanors at the time our Constitution was adopted. But put that aside. The Secretary lied to us. That should mean something. That should matter. We should act on it. Either remove him or stop funding him or both. And I'm going to call the question. Fair warning. People say, oh, well, don't surprise me, I'm told around here. Well, don't be surprised. It's July right now. We have 60 days until the government runs out of funding. And I'm telling you, I will fight the rule. I will fight every bill that comes to this floor that in any way will fund the Secretary of Homeland Security to continue to lie and fail to secure the homeland. The things that we need to do, we laid out in H.R. 2, the bill we passed this spring to secure the border. Restart infrastructure, border wall construction, clear the cane, build roads, provide the resources needed to actually contain the flow. Permanently implement the Remain in Mexico policy that President Trump adopted, requiring migrants to stay south of the border while any asylum claim is adjudicated. End catch and release. Keep migrant families together while their claims are processed. Treat minors from non-contiguous countries the same as we treat minors from Mexico by saying we will return them to their families. End parole abuse and asylum abuse. Restore them to their original intent. These things will reestablish the very rule of law that attracts migrants to come here. And if you think and say, as my colleagues on the other side of the aisle often do, that this is anti-brown, anti-Hispanic racism, that is a lie. Talk to Hispanic Texans, Hispanic Americans, sick of watching their communities get decimated, sick of watching the rule of law crumble, sick of watching cartels get empowered, sick of watching their own die from fentanyl poisonings. I'm not going to allow the race baiting and the game of we're going to call you racist to cow me away from standing up and defending the border of the United States, which we are required to do. I'm not going to do it. This is why I'm going to keep offering amendments to end diversity, equity, inclusion programs. I'm going to keep offering amendments to stop the racial division being sowed by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, including the President of the United States and everybody running these agencies, undermining our Department of Defense, dividing our country, sowing seeds of hatred, rather than bringing us together under that flag, together, united. We should end it. And I'm not going to back away from it, ever. I'm going to close with one final point. I have some colleagues who I know want some time, and I'll be happy to give it to them. I've focused a lot on the border. There are a lot of things that need to change. When we passed Limit, Save, Grow as a Republican Party in, I think, April, I felt that was one of the high water marks, along with passing H.R. 2 of this Congress, in laying out a vision for where we want to take the country. Find a path forward to balance the budget, limit spending, cut the size and scope of the federal bureaucracy, secure the border of the United States, limit the devastating damage that the so-called Inflation Reduction Act will be causing on our ability to be energy independent and the strength of our national security from energy freedom, cutting down the expansion of the Internal Revenue Service. And on this point, and there's other items in that, but we laid out an agenda. And I hope we will stick with that as we go through the appropriations process. But in addition to the border, I have to say that the Inflation Reduction Act, which is effectively funding slavery in China, the Congo, and around the world, needs to be ended, needs to be capped, limited, or ended. Goldman Sachs estimates the IRA's unreliable energy subsidies will cost $1.2 trillion. You want to know how you ended up with $32 trillion, soon to be $36 trillion in debt? There you go. We passed a debt ceiling limit increase. Within a month, we'd already added another $1 trillion to the debt. The IRA massively subsidizes EV purchases and manufacturing. The EPA has mandated that 2/3 of new cars be EVs by 2032. Well, I live in Texas. Driving from Austin to Midland ain't easy to do in an electronic vehicle. I also don't have $70,000 sitting around to buy a new car that then is expensive to deal with when the battery goes out. Yet all of this is heavily owned by China. China has 80+%, pushing 90% of the battery making manufacturing base. We are literally handing to China our entire energy security. It's like literally one of the stupidest things a free people has ever done. At a moment where we have military strength and economic strength that is being challenged around the world, the geniuses of this administration and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle decide we need to turn over our energy industry to our adversary. But it's so much worse. The Democratic Republic of the Congo produces 70% of the world's cobalt. NPR reported on how modern-day slavery in the Congo powers the rechargeable battery economy. Children in mines. There are probably 10,000 to 15,000 tunnels that are dug by hand by artisanal miners. None of them have supports, ventilation shafts, rock bolts, anything like that. And these tunnels collapse all the time, burying alive children who are down there. Trafficking. You've got these militias. Sometimes they're called commandos, and they will abduct children, traffic children, and recruit children from other parts of the Congo. China owns 80% of the industrial cobalt mines in Congo and controls 15 of the 19 primary cobalt mines in the country. It controls almost 80% of the electronic vehicle battery manufacturing. 80% of solar panels installed in the U.S. come from Chinese firms. I could go on and on. Meanwhile, while they do this, China has 1,100 coal-fired plants. 1,100. We have 250. China's building 2 new coal-fired plants a week. We're sitting around playing unicorn games saying, hey, let's throw up a few more windmills and solar panels and just hope that we'll be able to get our power from China. Can you imagine in 1939 going, hey, let's go over to Germany and say, why don't you provide our energy, guys? We got a deal for you. Or Japan. Well, here we sit. But I want to bring it back to the final point, and then I'll be yielding time to my colleagues in whichever order they choose. This is about humanity. We are empowering tyrants who are abusing children in mines around the world, enriching a handful of leftist elitists in this country through corporate cronyism to the tune of $1.2 trillion in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, while little children get exploited. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle pat themselves on the back because they're fixing things for climate change. No, you're not. You're not denting CO2 production. You could get rid of every single internal combustion engine, and you're going to drop CO2 production by 2 or 3%. And meanwhile, our border is wide open. Meanwhile, as I said, today, while I'm sitting here in this chamber, a little girl has been driven up I-95 through the nation's capital. up to New York as a part of the sex trafficking trade. The data indicates that it is so prevalent that is likely true. We know of the stash houses dotted around this country. We know of the abuses being perpetrated on children. We know of the deaths of our children in this country to fentanyl poisonings. I am not going to subsidize and fund evil. And I'm asking my Republican colleagues to join me in committing, before we get to the September 30th shutdown, to join our arms together and stand athwart an administration that is tyrannically undermining our freedom and our safety in Texas and throughout this country, while little children and our kids and our people are dying by the thousands because we refuse to do the basic duty of government, which is to secure our national borders. With that, I'll be pleased to yield to my friend from New York.